The morning of October 17th started like any other Friday in my 27 years of marriage to Michael Johnson. The sun filtered through our kitchen curtains in that soft, golden way that made everything look deceptively peaceful. I remember standing at the counter, flour dusting my hands, watching the apple pie cool on the rack. Emily's favorite, cinnamon and brown sugar, with a lattice top I'd spent 40 minutes perfecting. I didn't call ahead. I never did that sort of thing, just showed up unannounced. But that morning, something in me whispered that it would be nice to surprise her, to be kind, to be the mother-in-law who baked and cared and tried. God, how naive I was. The drive to Emily's house took 12 minutes. I counted every one of them later, when I was trying to piece together the exact moment my life split in two. The neighborhood where she and my son Daniel lived was picture perfect. White picket fences, front porch swings, hanging flower baskets swaying in the breeze. The kind of place where nothing bad was supposed to happen. I turned onto Maple Drive, the pie carefully balanced on the passenger seat, wrapped in my grandmother's checked cloth. That's when I saw it. Michael's silver SUV, parked right there in Emily's driveway, bold as day, like it had every right to be there. For a moment, just one suspended crystalline moment, my brain tried to make it make sense. Maybe he'd dropped something off for Daniel. Maybe there was a problem with the house. Maybe. But Michael had left for work at 7:30 that morning. He'd kissed my forehead, smelling of coffee and expensive cologne, and said he had back-to-back meetings until 4. He never mentioned Emily. He never mentioned stopping by. My chest tightened. Something cold and heavy settled in my stomach, spreading outward like ink in water. I sat in my car, engine still running, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The dashboard clock read 10:47 a.m. A neighbor walked by with a dog. A mail truck passed. Normal life, continuing all around me while mine began to unravel. I should have left. I should have driven away, called Michael, asked him directly. But I couldn't move. Something stronger than fear, stronger than logic, pulled me forward. I turned off the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. The gravel crunched under my shoes as I walked toward the house. Each footstep too loud, too real. My heart hammered against my ribs. I could hear laughter floating from inside. Light, easy laughter. His laughter. The kind of genuine, unguarded sound I hadn't heard directed at me in years. Emily's kitchen window was open. Just a crack, but enough. I stood beneath it, my back pressed against the cool siding, and listened. "You're late," Emily said. Her voice had that teasing, almost scolding tone. "I thought maybe your wife was keeping you busy." My wife. She said it like I was an inconvenience. A thing, not a person. Then Michael's voice, low and warm. "Don't start, Emily. You know how careful we have to be." Silence. I stopped breathing. "If Daniel ever finds out, we're done," he continued. "This whole thing falls apart. Daniel, my son, their son." The pie slipped from my hands. I didn't try to catch it. It hit the ground with a soft, wet thud, apples and crust scattering across the driveway like debris from an explosion. I stared at the mess, unable to process what I was seeing, what I was hearing. Inside, Emily laughed again. "She'll never suspect. She trusts both of us." Both of us. The words echoed in my head, hollow and sharp. She trusts both of us. I took one step backward, then another. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely fish my car keys from my pocket. Inside the house, I heard movement. Chairs scraping, footsteps approaching. I ran. I don't remember getting into my car. I don't remember starting the engine or backing out of the driveway. I don't remember the drive home at all. It was as if my body knew what to do while my mind shattered into 1,000 pieces, each one cutting deeper than the last. When I finally came back to myself, I was sitting in my own kitchen. The clock on the wall said 1:15 p.m. More than 2 hours had passed. I was still wearing my coat. My hands were sticky with pie filling. The smell of burnt coffee filled the air. I must have left the pot on. I stared at the wall in front of me, at the framed photographs of our family. Michael and me on our wedding day, young and hopeful. Daniel as a baby, then a boy, then a man. And there, in the center, the photo from Daniel and Emily's wedding 3 years ago. Her smile, radiant in white lace. My smile, proud and trusting beside her. How long had it been going on? How many family dinners had I sat through, praising her cooking, admiring her dress, loving her like the daughter I never had? How many times had Michael kissed me goodnight and then called her? How many lies had I swallowed without even knowing I was choking? A sound escaped my throat, something between a laugh and a sob. It didn't sound like it came from me. I stood up, walked to the sink, and splashed cold water on my face. The woman in the mirror looked like a stranger. Red-rimmed eyes, lips pressed into a thin, trembling line, hair disheveled, older than I remembered being. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something. I wanted to call Michael and demand answers, call Emily and curse her, call Daniel and... No, I couldn't call Daniel. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Whatever I did next would destroy my son's world. His marriage, his trust in his father, his trust in me if he thought I'd known and said nothing. I was trapped in a truth that would hurt everyone I loved. By evening, I'd convinced myself I'd misheard, that I'd misunderstood, that there was some rational explanation for why my husband was at our daughter-in-law's house on a Friday morning, speaking in that intimate tone, saying those specific words. But deep down, I already knew. You can't mistake the sound of betrayal when it's spoken by the man you've shared your life with for 27 years. I sat in the darkening living room, watching the shadows lengthen across the floor. Every sound outside, barking dogs, passing cars, the creak of our porch, felt foreign, like I was living inside someone else's story. Michael came home at midnight. I heard his key in the lock, the door opening, his footsteps in the hallway, heavy and careless. He walked into the living room and stopped when he saw me sitting there in the dark. "Laura, why are you sitting in the dark?" He flipped on the light and I blinked against the sudden brightness. He looked normal. That was the worst part. He looked exactly like the man I'd woken up next to that morning. Graying hair neatly combed, blue eyes clear, that easy smile that had charmed me when we were both 23. He crossed the room and kissed my forehead. The gesture was automatic, meaningless, and I smelled it. Gardenia, Emily's perfume, mixed with something else, whiskey, and underneath it all, guilt. "You okay?" he asked, his voice soft, almost tender. That was the moment I knew with absolute certainty. He wasn't sorry. He wasn't even afraid. This was routine for him. Natural. Easy. "I'm fine," I sagely said. My voice came out steady, though my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might break through my chest. He nodded, accepting my lie as easily as I'd accepted his for years. He poured himself a drink, scotch, neat, and turned on the television, just like any other night. But for me, the world had tilted on its axis. Everything I thought was safe and real and true had become a lie I was forced to inhabit. I watched him settle into his chair, watched him sip his drink, watched him laugh at something on the screen. This man who I'd built a life with, who I'd sacrificed for, worked for, loved with everything I had. This stranger. That night I lay awake beside him, listening to his slow, careless breathing. My hands were cold. My chest felt hollow. The words kept echoing in my head, over and over like a record skipping. If Daniel ever finds out, we're done. She'll never suspect. She trusts both of us. I thought about my son, about the day he was born, when Michael had cried holding him for the first time, about teaching Daniel to ride a bike, to tie his shoes, to be a good man, about the day he introduced us to Emily, his eyes shining with love. "She's the one, Mom," he'd said. "I'm going to marry her." And I'd hugged them both, thrilled that my son had found happiness. Now that happiness was built on rot. By dawn, something had crystallized inside me. The shock was beginning to burn away. leaving something harder in its place. Not anger yet, that would come later, but a cold, clear understanding. I would not be the woman who stayed silent. I would not be the woman they could manipulate and deceive and discard. I would not break quietly. As pale light crept through the bedroom window, I made myself a promise. They would both regret underestimating me, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the truth anymore. The next morning, Michael left early. "Business trip," he said. "Back Monday." I didn't ask questions. I just nodded, kissed his cheek like I always did, and watched him drive away. The moment his car disappeared around the corner, I opened a fresh notebook and sat down at the kitchen table. At the top of the first page, I wrote, assets, then accounts, then evidence. I'd spent 27 years being the supportive wife, making his favorite meals, hosting his business dinners, raising our son while he built his career. I'd trusted him with everything, our finances, our future, our life. Now I realized I didn't actually know anything about our money. Michael had always handled it. "Don't worry about it," he'd say whenever I asked. "I've got it covered." And I'd believed him, because that's what you do when you love someone. You trust them. What a fool I'd been. I spent that entire Saturday going through papers, bank statements I found in Michael's office, investment portfolios, property deeds, tax returns. I photographed everything with my phone, storing it all in a hidden folder. The more I dug, the less I understood. Transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, business expenses that seemed excessive, a second credit card I'd never seen before. I needed help. I needed someone who would understand, who wouldn't judge, who'd already survived what I was just beginning to face. I needed Rachel Martinez. Rachel and I had been roommates in college. Best friends, really, until life and distance got in the way. She'd been my maid of honor. I'd been hers. Then we'd both gotten busy with marriages and careers and children, and somehow 20 years had slipped by with nothing more than Christmas cards and occasional likes on social media. But 5 years ago, I'd seen her post about her divorce. The pain in her words had stayed with me. I found her number and stared at it for 10 minutes before I finally called. She picked up on the third ring. "Laura?" Her voice was softer than I remembered, but there was strength underneath it. "Is that really you?" "Rachel, My voice cracked. To my horror, I started crying. I hadn't cried yet. Not really. Not until I heard her voice. "Where are you?" she asked immediately. "I'm coming over." She arrived an hour later. When I opened the door, she took one look at my face and pulled me into her arms. She didn't ask questions. She didn't say anything. She just held me while I fell apart. We sat at my kitchen table for 3 hours. I told her everything. The car in the driveway, the conversation through the window, the perfume on Michael's collar, the evidence I'd been gathering. Rachel didn't interrupt, didn't gasp or exclaim or pity me. She just listened, her dark eyes steady on mine, her hand resting on my arm. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, 5 years ago, I found out my husband was sleeping with his coworker. I thought I would die. I thought my life was over." She paused. "But I didn't die. I started again." "How?" The word came out as a whisper. She smiled, a small, sad smile that held wisdom I was only beginning to understand. "By realizing that the worst thing had already happened. Once you lose everything you were afraid to lose, you're finally free." Her words settled over me like a blanket, not comforting exactly, but real, solid, true. "What do I do?" I asked. "First, you get a lawyer, a good one. Before you confront anyone, you protect yourself legally and financially." She pulled out her phone. "I'm texting you the name of mine, James Porter. He's tough, and he's fair, and he'll help you understand what you're entitled to. And then you decide what you want. Not what Michael wants, not what Emily wants, not even what Daniel wants. What you want. For the first time in probably a long time, you choose yourself." Choose myself. The concept felt foreign, almost radical. After Rachel left, I sat in the gathering darkness, turning her words over in my mind. The house was silent. Too silent. For years, I'd filled that silence with activity, cooking, cleaning, planning, caring. Always for someone else. What did I want? The answer came quickly, clearly. I wanted my dignity back. That night, around 2 in the morning, I crept down to Michael's office. He'd always kept it locked when he wasn't home. "Work stuff," he'd say. "Confidential." I'd never questioned it. Never had a reason to. But I'd kept the spare key. It was hidden behind the picture frame in the hallway. A photo of us from our 10th anniversary, both of us tanned and smiling on a beach in Mexico. The key still worked. Inside, his office smelled like stale cologne and expensive whiskey. His desk was immaculate. Too immaculate. Everything in its place, perfectly organized. I turned on the small lamp and began searching. It took me almost an hour to find what I was looking for, a folder tucked in the bottom drawer, beneath a stack of old contracts. Inside were printed emails. Dozens of them. My hands shook as I read the first one. From M. Johnson at JohnsonInvest.com to E. Martinez at Daniel Johnson Arc. Com date, July 15th. Subject Q3. Transfer Emily. The transfer needs to go through by end of quarter, or Daniel will notice the gap in the business account. I'll move $40K this week, another $35K next month. Keep the paper trail clean on your end. M. I read it again, then again. The words refused to make sense. They weren't just having an affair. They were stealing from my son. I flipped through the rest of the folder. More emails. Bank statements for accounts I'd never heard of. Receipts for hotels, restaurants, weekend trips. And at the bottom, a handwritten note in Michael's familiar scrawl. Total moved. $340,000, $340,000. My son's money. Money he'd earned, worked for, built his business with. Stolen by his own father and his wife. I sat back in the chair, the folder clutched in my hands. The shock had worn off now. In its place was something cold and sharp and utterly focused. This wasn't just betrayal. This was theft. Fraud. A crime. And I had proof. I took photos of every document, every email, every receipt. I uploaded them to a secure cloud drive Rachel had told me about. Then I carefully put everything back exactly as I'd found it and locked the office door behind me. As I climbed back into bed, I felt different. The grief was still there, yes, the pain, but underneath it all was something new, purpose. They thought they were clever. They thought I was blind, complacent, easy to fool. They had no idea what was coming. I closed my eyes and whispered into the darkness. You thought I'd stay silent? Watch me. Monday morning arrived cold and gray. Michael was still away on his business trip, probably with Emily somewhere, I thought bitterly, and the house felt cavernous without him. But for the first time in days, I wasn't paralyzed. I had a plan. James Porter's office was in the old part of downtown, tucked between a bookstore and a coffee shop that had been there since the 70s. The building itself was elegant in that worn, intellectual way. Brick facade, tall windows, the kind of place that smelled like paper and wood polish and old secrets. I sat in the waiting room, hands folded neatly on my lap, pretending to read a magazine I couldn't see. My heart was beating hard, but my face was calm. I'd practiced this in the mirror that morning. The composed expression, the steady voice. I would not fall apart. Not here. Mrs. Johnson? The receptionist smiled at me. Mr. Porter will see you now. James Porter was younger than I expected. Late 40s, maybe, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and salt and pepper hair that looked like he ran his hands through it too often. He stood when I entered, extending his hand. Mrs. Johnson, please sit down. His voice was gentle but professional. Rachel Martinez speaks very highly of you. She speaks highly of you, too. I sat in the leather chair across from his desk, my purse in my lap like armor. He settled back in his chair, studying me with an openness that made me want to both trust him and run away. So, tell me what's going on. I'd rehearsed this. I'd planned exactly what to say, how to say it clinically, without emotion. But when I opened my mouth, everything came out in a rush. I've been married to Michael Johnson for 27 years. 3 days ago, I found out he's having an affair with our daughter-in-law, Emily, my son's wife, and I paused, steadying my voice. And I have evidence they've been stealing from my son's business. James didn't react with shock or pity. He simply pulled out a legal pad and began taking notes. Tell me about the evidence. I opened my purse and pulled out a flash drive. Emails between them. Bank statements showing transfers from my son's business account to a private account controlled by Emily. Receipts, dates, everything. He plugged the drive into his computer, and for several minutes the only sound was his mouse clicking and the occasional scratch of his pen. I watched his face carefully. His expression never changed, but his jaw tightened incrementally with each document. Finally, he looked up. "Mrs. Johnson, Laura, please." "Laura?" He removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "This is substantial. How much do you know about your own finances? Your joint accounts, property, investments?" The question hit me like cold water. "Not enough. Michael always handled everything. He said I didn't need to worry about it." "That's a problem." James leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. "In my experience, when one spouse controls all the financial information, it's often because they have something to hide. Before we file anything, we need to get a complete picture of your marital assets, and we need to do it quickly, before your husband realizes what's happening." "How do we do that?" "I'll need copies of everything you can find. Bank statements, tax returns, property deeds, retirement accounts, business documents. Everything. Can you access these without alerting your husband?" I thought of Michael's office, the locked drawer, the spare key. "Yes." "Good." He slid a folder across the desk. "This is a preliminary questionnaire. Take your time filling it out. And Laura?" He waited until I met his eyes. "I need you to be honest with me about something. Is there any possibility your husband has hidden assets, moved money offshore, created shell companies?" The question should have shocked me. Instead, I felt strangely calm. "I don't know, but given what he's already done, I wouldn't be surprised." James nodded slowly. "Then we need to act fast. If your husband suspects you know, he could make assets disappear overnight. I've seen it happen." "So what do we do?" "We build an airtight case. We document everything. And when we're ready, we file for divorce and freeze the accounts simultaneously. He won't see it coming until it's too late." He paused. "But I need to ask you directly. Are you ready for this? Once we start, there's no going back. Your marriage will be over. Your family will be fractured. It will be ugly." I thought of the pie on Emily's driveway, of Michael's voice through the window, of that email, or Daniel will notice the gap. "I'm ready," I said, and I meant it. Over the next week, I became a detective in my own home. Every morning after Michael left for work, I systematically went through his office. I photographed documents. I made copies. I logged into our bank accounts using passwords I found written in his day planner. I even called our accountant, pretending I needed information for tax purposes, and got him to email me 3 years' worth of returns. What I found made my blood run cold. Michael had been moving money for almost 2 years, not just from Daniel's business, from our joint accounts too. Small amounts at first, then larger. Tens of thousands of dollars transferred to accounts I'd never heard of, most of them in Emily's name. He'd taken out a second mortgage on our house without telling me. My name was on the deed, but somehow, forged signature? I didn't know. The paperwork had gone through. He'd cashed out half of his retirement fund and moved it to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Our entire financial life was a carefully constructed lie. I documented everything, every transfer, every account, every shred of evidence. James had given me a secure portal to upload documents, and each night I fed it more ammunition. "This is better than most cases I see," James told me during our second meeting. "Your husband got sloppy, arrogant maybe. He didn't think you'd ever look." "He didn't think I was smart enough to figure it out," I said quietly. James's expression hardened. "Then he's a fool." It was a Wednesday night. 2 weeks after I'd first walked into James's office, when Michael noticed something had changed. We were sitting at dinner, grilled chicken and roasted vegetables, the same meal I'd made 1,000 times before. The television was on in the background. Everything looked normal, but it wasn't. Michael set down his fork and looked at me. Really looked at me for the first time in months. "You're quiet lately," he said. I continued cutting my chicken. "Am I? You've been going out a lot, too. Shopping? Meeting friends?" There was something in his tone. Not quite accusation, but close. Testing. I met his eyes. "Just running errands. Why?" "No reason." He picked up his fork again, but I could feel him watching me. "You just seem different." "Different how?" "I don't know. Distant." I almost laughed. Distant. After 27 years of being whatever he needed me to be, of shrinking myself to fit his life, of swallowing my own dreams and desires and identity, now he noticed I was distant. "Don't worry, Michael," I said, my voice perfectly calm. "I'm not the one sneaking around." His fork froze halfway to his mouth. For just a second, one brief, beautiful second, I saw panic flash across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by confusion. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Just that you've been so busy lately. All those meetings, those business trips. You must be exhausted." He studied me, trying to figure out if I knew something or if I was just making conversation. I kept my expression neutral, pleasant even. Finally, he set down his fork. "Laura, if something's bothering you, just say it." "Nothing's bothering me." I smiled. "Everything's perfect." The word hung between us like a blade. Michael went back to eating, but I could feel the tension radiating off him. Good. Let him wonder. Let him worry. That night he stayed up late in his office. I could hear him on the phone, voice low and urgent. I couldn't make out the words, but I didn't need to. I knew who he was calling. The next morning, Michael left his phone on the kitchen counter while he went outside to take a call on his work cell. It sat there, screen dark, innocuous. I should have left it alone. But I didn't. I picked it up. His passcode was our anniversary. He'd never changed it, probably never thought he needed to. The phone unlocked on the first try. A text message preview lit up the screen. "Emily, be careful. She's acting strange. I think she might know something." I stared at the words, my heart racing. So they were watching me too, testing me, trying to figure out if I'd discovered their secret. I heard Michael's voice getting louder outside, wrapping up his call. Quickly, I set the phone back exactly where he'd left it and moved to the coffee maker. When he came back in, I was pouring my coffee, humming softly. He glanced at his phone, picked it up, and walked away. I saw him delete the message as he went. Too late. I'd already seen it. That afternoon, I met with James again. I brought him the latest documents, screenshots of text messages I'd managed to recover from our phone bill, more bank statements, a particularly damning email I'd found about creating a contingency account. James spread everything across his conference table, studying it like a general planning a battle. "This is remarkable work, Laura," he said finally. "You've essentially built our entire case for us. Is it enough?" "More than enough. We have evidence of adultery, financial fraud, and what appears to be systematic theft from your son's business. If we play this right, you'll get a very favorable settlement. And your son," he paused, "your son will have grounds to pursue criminal charges if he chooses." The weight of that settled over me. Criminal charges against his own father. "Does Daniel know yet?" James asked gently. "No, I can't. I don't know how to tell him." "The court proceedings will be public record. Once we file, word will get out. You should prepare yourself for that, and you should consider telling your son before he hears it from someone else." I nodded, even though the thought made me sick. James closed the folder and looked at me seriously. "I can have the divorce papers ready by next week. We'll file and simultaneously request a freeze on all joint accounts and business accounts linked to your husband. He won't be able to move any more money. But Laura," he paused, "once we do this, there's no taking it back. Are you absolutely certain? I thought of Emily's text. I think she might know something. I thought of Michael deleting it, thinking he'd covered his tracks. I thought of my son, working 14-hour days to build his architecture firm, while his own father and wife bled it dry. I'm certain, I said. File the papers. The day I filed for divorce was November 3rd. I remember because it was Daniel's birthday. He was turning 32. I'd always made him chocolate cake with buttercream frosting, his favorite since he was 6 years old. This year, I couldn't. This year, I was destroying his world instead. The courthouse was cold and gray, the kind of building designed to strip away any romance or hope about the institution of marriage. I climbed the steps slowly, papers clutched to my chest, my heels clicking against stone. James met me at the entrance. Ready? I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. The filing itself was anticlimactic. A clerk stamped the papers, filed them in a system, handed me a copy. Just like that, 27 years reduced to a case number. The sheriff will serve him this afternoon, James said as we walked back to the parking lot. Typically at his workplace, and I've already filed the emergency motion to freeze accounts. The judge should sign it within hours. How long until he knows? He probably already knows. The system sends automated notifications. James's expression was sympathetic. You should go home. He'll likely try to contact you. I drove home slowly, my hand steady on the wheel. It was done. The first stone had been thrown. Everything that came next was inevitable now. Michael's SUV was already in the driveway when I pulled up. Engine still running, exhaust puffing in the cold air. He was standing by the front door, phone in hand, his face tight with barely controlled rage. So it's true, he said the moment I stepped out of my car. His voice was sharp, cold. You filed. I met his eyes. Yes, he laughed, a short, harsh sound. Without even talking to me first? Jesus, Laura, after all these years? After all these years, I repeated quietly. You think I'd still be willing to talk? He took a step toward me, not threatening exactly, but assertive, trying to reclaim the power dynamic he'd always held in our marriage. You're making a mistake. You don't know what you're getting into. Half of everything we have you got because of me. My work, my investments, Your lies? I interrupted. Your theft? Your affair with our son's wife? The words landed like grenades. Michael's face went white, then red. I don't know what you think you know, he said carefully. But you're wrong. You're confused. I'm done, I said simply. That's what I am. For a long moment, he just stared at me, trying to read my face, trying to find the soft, pliable woman he'd married. The woman who'd always backed down, always apologized, always made peace. She was gone. Look, he said, his voice shifting to something softer, more calculating. If this is about Emily, don't, I whispered. The word came out sharp as a knife. Don't you dare say her name to me. He stopped, caught himself, then shrugged like it didn't matter. Fine, I'll call my lawyer tomorrow. We'll make this clean. No need to turn it into a circus. But I saw it, the fear underneath his calm, the realization that I knew more than he'd thought, that I wasn't going to be easy to manage. You should probably find somewhere else to stay tonight, I said. I've changed the locks. It was a lie. I hadn't changed them yet, but I wanted to see his reaction. His jaw clenched. You can't keep me out of my own house. Actually, according to my lawyer, I can. It's called a temporary restraining order. It's being processed right now. Another lie, but effective. Michael's hands curled into fists at his sides. For a second, I thought he might actually hit me. Then he seemed to remember himself. Remember where we were, that neighbors might be watching. This isn't over, he said quietly. You have no idea what you've started. He got in his SUV and drove away, tires screeching on the asphalt. I stood in the driveway, watching him disappear, and felt nothing. No sadness, no regret. Just a strange, hollow calm. I'd thrown the first punch. Now we'd see who was left standing. Emily called that night, 3 times. I didn't answer the first 2 calls. But the third time, curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to hear what she had to say, what possible explanation she could offer. I picked up. "Laura," her voice was breathy, almost tearful. "Thank God. Can we talk, please?" "There's nothing to talk about." "Please." The tremor in her voice was carefully calibrated. "I know things look bad, but you have to understand." "I understand perfectly," I said, my voice flat. "You betrayed my son. You betrayed me. That's all I need to know. Wait. Just wait." She was crying now, or pretending to. "It's not what you think. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Michael said—" She stopped abruptly. "Michael said what?" I pressed. Silence on the other end. Then barely audible. "He said he was going to end things with you, that you'd understand, that you two had grown apart anyway." The words hit me like ice water. He'd planned it. He'd told Emily that our marriage was ending, that I would just accept it, step aside quietly so he could have his new life with her. "So it was planned," I said slowly, letting the realization settle. "You knew, from the beginning." "No, I just mean—" He was confused. We both were confused, I repeated. "That's an interesting word for stealing $340,000 from my son." Sharp intake of breath. "What?" "You heard me, Emily. I know about the money, the transfers, the offshore accounts, all of it. That wasn't— I didn't—" She was panicking now, the careful performance crumbling. "Michael handled all of that. I just signed where he told me to sign. I didn't know it was fraud," I finished. "Theft? Embezzlement? Pick your crime, Emily. You're guilty of all of them." "You can't prove any of this," she said, but her voice had lost its strength. "And if this goes public, if you tell Daniel, it'll destroy him." "Do you really want that?" "He'll hate both of us. It'll destroy your relationship with your son." There it was. The real reason for her call. Not to apologize, to threaten. "You're not worried about my son," I said quietly. "You're worried about yourself." "Laura, please," her voice cracked. "We can fix this. We can all move on. You don't have to do this. You don't have to ruin everyone's lives just because—" "Just because what?" I interrupted. "Because my husband and daughter-in-law decided to lie to me, steal from me, and destroy my family?" "You're right, Emily. I don't have to do this." I paused, letting the silence stretch. "I want to." I heard her breath catch. "You're going to regret this." "Maybe," I said. "But not as much as you will." I hung up. 10 minutes later, an email arrived. No subject line, no signature, just one sentence. "If you don't want your son to find out everything, you'll drop the case." I read it twice. Then I printed it, added it to my growing evidence folder, and forwarded it to James. His reply came within minutes. "Perfect. They're getting desperate. Keep everything. Don't respond." I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. Somewhere out there, Michael and Emily were probably together right now, strategizing, worrying, realizing that the quiet, obedient wife they'd both underestimated was actually several steps ahead of them. Good. Let them worry. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to satisfaction. They came together 2 nights later. I was in the kitchen making tea when I heard the knock. Firm, insistent. When I opened the door, they were both standing there. Michael in a pressed charcoal suit, Emily beside him in a cream-colored sweater and jeans, her hair perfectly styled. They looked like they'd coordinated their appearance, presented a united front. "Laura," Michael said, his voice smooth, controlled. "We need to talk." "No, we don't." I started to close the door. Emily stepped forward, her hand out. "Please, just 5 minutes. That's all we're asking." I looked at her, really looked at her. This woman I'd welcomed into my family, who I'd taught to make my grandmother's apple pie recipe, who'd called me Mom. "You have 3 minutes," I said. I didn't invite them in. We stood in the doorway, cold air rushing past them into my warm house. Michael glanced at the neighbors' houses, then lowered his voice. "You're making this public, Laura. That's not going to end well for anyone." "Especially not for you," Emily added. Her voice was soft, almost pleading, but her eyes were hard. "Is that a threat?" I asked mildly. "It's reality," Michael said. "You think you're going to walk away from this marriage with everything? You've lived off my income for decades. You have no job, no independent money, no evidence?" I suggested. "Is that what you were going to say?" He stopped. Emily's face went pale. "Because I have plenty of evidence, Michael. Emails, bank statements, text messages, photographs." I smiled. "You got sloppy, both of you." "You went through my phone?" Michael's voice rose. Your personal what? Your personal correspondence with the woman you're sleeping with? While she's married to our son?" I laughed. "Yes, Michael. I went through your phone, your computer, your office, everything." "That's illegal," Emily whispered. "Actually, it's not. I'm still legally married to Michael. I have every right to access our shared devices and documents." I looked at her directly. "But stealing from your husband's business? That is illegal." "I didn't steal anything. You signed the transfer authorizations," I said calmly. "Your signature is on 37 different documents moving money from Daniel's business account to your personal account. James has copies of all of them." Emily turned to Michael, her voice rising. "You said this was safe. You said she'd never find out. You said—" "Shut up," Michael hissed, but it was too late. I'd heard enough. "You should go now," I said, "before I call the police and report you for trespassing." "You're going to regret this," Michael said, his voice low and dangerous. "I'll make sure of it. You'll get nothing. I'll tie this up in court for years. "I'll what?" I interrupted. "Be free of you? Yes. I think I will." Emily grabbed his arm. "Let's go. This was a mistake. She's not worth it." She turned and walked away, heels clicking on the sidewalk. Michael stared at me for another long moment. "You've changed," he said finally. "No," I replied. I finally stopped pretending. He left. I watched them get into his SUV, Emily in the passenger seat where I used to sit, and drive away. I closed the door, locked it, and leaned against it for a moment. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from adrenaline. I'd faced them both. I hadn't backed down, hadn't apologized, hadn't made peace. For the first time in my marriage, I'd chosen myself. That night I barely slept. Every sound made me jump, a car passing, the house settling, the wind against the windows. I kept thinking they'd come back, that Michael would somehow break in, that Emily would show up with police, claiming I'd threatened her. But nothing happened. The night passed slowly, quietly. At dawn, I called James. "We move forward," I said when he answered. "No delays, no negotiations. I want a court date as soon as possible." There was a pause. Then, "I'll file the motion today. We should have a hearing scheduled within 2 weeks. "Thank you. Laura?" His voice was gentle. "How are you holding up?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. "I'm ready," I said. "Whatever comes next, I'm ready." 2 days later, the notice arrived. Preliminary hearing scheduled for November 28th, 3 weeks away. I stood on my front porch that evening, watching the sun set behind the bare trees. The air was cold and clean. Winter was coming. Somewhere Michael and Emily were probably panicking, calling lawyers, trying to figure out how to protect themselves. But I wasn't panicking. I was calm, focused, clear. They thought they'd broken me when I found out about the affair. They thought discovering their betrayal would destroy me. Instead, it had forged me into something harder, stronger, something they should have feared from the beginning. I whispered to the cold evening air, "You thought you broke me, but you can't break what's finally becoming whole." The words felt like a promise, like a prophecy. Inside, my phone rang. Rachel. "How are you doing?" she asked. I smiled. A real smile. I'm winning. And for the first time since that morning at Emily's house, I actually believed it. November 28th dawned cold and sharp, the kind of morning where your breath hangs in the air and everything feels crystallized, permanent. I woke at 5, though I hadn't really slept. I'd spent the night rehearsing, not what I would say, but who I would be. Calm, dignified, unbreakable. I dressed carefully. Navy blue suit, tailored and professional. Pearl earrings my mother had given me. Hair pulled back in a low bun. Minimal makeup. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw a woman I barely recognized. Stronger, somehow. Harder around the edges, but more real. James picked me up at 7:30. "Big day," he said as I slid into his car. "Yes." "Nervous?" I considered the question. "No, not anymore." He smiled slightly. "Good, because we're going to win this." The courthouse was already busy when we arrived. Lawyers in dark suits, couples avoiding eye contact, a general air of institutional sadness that hung over family court like fog. Inside the courtroom, Michael was already seated at the defendant's table. He wore a charcoal gray suit, expensive watch glinting under the fluorescent lights. He looked composed, confident even, like he still believed he could charm his way out of this. Emily sat beside him, playing the role of supportive. What? I didn't even know what to call her anymore. Mistress felt too romantic. Accomplice was more accurate. She dressed like she was going to church. Modest dress, cardigan, hair styled in soft waves. The picture of innocence. When she saw me, she offered a small, polite smile. The same smile she'd used at Thanksgiving dinners and birthday parties. I didn't smile back. James and I took our seats. He laid out folders with meticulous precision, each one labeled and tabbed. Years of evidence condensed into manila folders. "All rise." Judge Elizabeth Brennan entered. A woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and the kind of face that suggested she'd seen every lie, every excuse, every manipulation that humans were capable of. "Please be seated," she said, her voice crisp. "This is a preliminary hearing in the matter of Johnson versus Johnson. We're here to address motions filed by the plaintiff regarding asset division, allegations of adultery, and—" She paused, looking at her notes. "Allegations of financial fraud." Michael's lawyer stood, a slick man named Richard Carver, who probably charged $500 an hour. "Your Honor, my client disputes all allegations of impropriety. This is simply a case of a marriage that's run its course. Mrs. Johnson is attempting to weaponize the court system to—" "Mr. Carver," Judge Brennan interrupted. "I'll hear from the plaintiff's counsel first." James stood, buttoning his jacket. When he spoke, his voice was calm but carried weight. "Your Honor, this case is about more than a failed marriage. It's about systematic deception, adultery, and financial fraud that has victimized not only my client, but her son as well." He opened the first folder. "I'd like to submit into evidence email correspondence between Mr. Michael Johnson and Ms. Emily Martinez, Mrs. Johnson's daughter-in-law, spanning 18 months. These emails explicitly detail their romantic relationship and coordinate the transfer of funds from a business account belonging to the plaintiff's son, Daniel Johnson." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Emily's face went pale. "Objection," Carver said quickly. "Those emails were obtained without my client's consent. Mrs. Johnson had legal access to shared devices as Mr. Johnson's wife," James countered smoothly. "Everything was obtained legally during the course of the marriage." Judge Brennan examined the documents James handed her. The courtroom was silent except for the rustle of papers. Finally, she looked up. "These are quite explicit. Mr. Carver, does your client deny the relationship?" Michael leaned toward his lawyer, whispering urgently. Carver straightened. "Your Honor, my client's personal relationships are not relevant to the division of marital assets. They are when those relationships involve fraud," James said. He opened another folder. Bank statements showing transfers totaling $340,000 from Daniel Johnson Architecture, LLC, to an account controlled by Miss Martinez. Transfers authorized by both Mr. Johnson and Miss Martinez. He placed a stack of documents on the judge's bench. Mr. Johnson had power of attorney over his son's business accounts. He used that authority to systematically drain funds into accounts he and Ms. Martinez controlled jointly. Emily made a small sound, something between a gasp and a sob. Judge Brennan's expression darkened. Martinez, you're not a party to these proceedings, but I need to understand your involvement. Did you knowingly participate in these transfers? Emily stood shakily, her lawyer, a younger woman who looked increasingly uncomfortable, standing with her. I just signed what Michael told me to sign. I didn't understand what— You signed 37 transfer authorizations, James said, his voice cutting across hers. 37 times you moved money from your husband's business account to your personal account. Are you claiming you thought that was legal? I trusted Michael, she said, tears streaming down her face now. He said it was restructuring, that it was all above board. So you're admitting you knowingly signed the documents? James pressed. I stood. I didn't plan to, but something in me couldn't stay silent anymore. Your Honor, I said, my voice steady. May I speak? Judge Brennan looked surprised, but nodded. Briefly, Mrs. Johnson. I turned to face Michael. For the first time since that morning at Emily's house, I looked directly into his eyes. Michael told our daughter-in-law that he was leaving me, that our marriage was over, that I would understand. My voice didn't shake. He planned this. He told her I wouldn't fight, that I'd just step aside, let him have his new life while he drained our son's business to fund it. Michael's face had gone red. That's not— And when I found out, I continued, speaking over him, when I discovered what you'd done, not just to me but to Daniel, you threatened me. You tried to intimidate me. You sent anonymous emails telling me to drop the case or Daniel would find out everything. I pulled out my phone, showed the screenshots to the judge, as if the truth was something I should be afraid of. Your Honor, Carver tried to interject, but I wasn't done. I've been married to Michael for 27 years. I've spent those years being quiet, being accommodating, being the kind of wife who doesn't ask questions, doesn't make waves, doesn't cause trouble. I looked back at the judge. I'm done being that woman. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Judge Brennan studied me for a long moment. Then she turned to Michael and Emily. Mr. Johnson, Ms. Martinez, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I suggest you answer honestly. Did you engage in a romantic relationship while Ms. Martinez was married to Mr. Johnson's son? Michael and Emily looked at each other. Some wordless communication passed between them. Then Emily broke. Yes, she whispered. But it wasn't supposed to be like this. Michael said— She turned to him, her voice rising. You said she'd never find out. You said the money transfers were safe. You said— Shut up, Michael hissed. Stop talking. Stop talking, Emily's voice went shrill. You're the one who set all this up. You're the one who told me to open those accounts, to sign those papers. You knew exactly what you were doing, Michael snapped back. Don't pretend you were some innocent victim. You wanted the money just as much as— Order! Judge Brennan's gavel cracked against the bench like a gunshot. But the damage was done. They'd turned on each other, right there in open court. Every word recorded. Every accusation witnessed. James leaned toward me and whispered, That's all we needed. Judge Brennan's voice cut through the chaos. I've heard enough. Mr. Johnson, Ms. Martinez, I'm ordering a full forensic audit of all accounts connected to either of you. This court is adjourned for 30 days while we investigate the full extent of the financial irregularities. She looked at Michael with barely concealed disgust. And Mr. Johnson, all marital assets are hereby frozen pending final judgment. You are not to access, transfer, or otherwise manipulate any accounts held jointly with your wife. The gavel fell again. Final. Outside the courthouse, cold wind bit at my face. I stood on the steps, breathing in the sharp November air, feeling lighter than I had in months. Michael caught up to me on the sidewalk, Carver hurrying behind him. You think this is over? He said, his voice low and venomous. You've humiliated me, Laura, destroyed my reputation. Daniel will never forgive you for this. I turned to face him, my voice calm. No, Michael. He'll never forgive you. You stole from your own son. You slept with his wife. I didn't do that. You did." For a moment, he looked like he might say something else. Then his face twisted into something ugly. "You've always been colder than you pretend," he said. "I should have seen it years ago." "You taught me?" I replied simply. He stared at me for one more moment, then turned and walked away. Emily was waiting by his car, mascara streaked down her face, hands shaking as she lit a cigarette. I watched them drive away and felt nothing, no triumph, no vindication, just quiet. James appeared at my elbow. "You did well in there." "I didn't do anything," I said. "They destroyed themselves." "Sometimes that's the best revenge," he said softly. The judgment came 3 weeks later, not in a courtroom this time, but in a letter delivered to my door. I sat at my kitchen table and read it 3 times, each time slower than the last. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Laura Johnson. Marital assets to be divided 70-30 in favor of the plaintiff due to evidence of adultery and financial malfeasance. Mr. Johnson is ordered to pay restitution to Daniel Johnson in the amount of $340,000 plus interest. Ms. Emily Martinez's name is to be removed from all corporate documents. The words blurred together. I'd won. Completely. But victory didn't feel the way I'd imagined. It wasn't triumphant or joyful. It was quiet, heavy, the kind of weight that presses into your chest and makes it hard to breathe. That evening I called Daniel. He'd been silent through most of the proceedings. His lawyer had advised him not to comment until everything was finalized. But now it was over. Now he needed to know everything. "Mom," he said when he answered. His voice sounded tired, broken. "Daniel, I know," he said. "I know everything. The lawyer sent me copies of everything." Silence stretched between us. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry you had to find out this way." "Did you know?" he asked. "Before the hearing? Did you know what they were doing?" "I found out 6 weeks ago. I wanted to tell you, but you needed proof," he finished. "I understand." Another pause. "Mom, I don't know what to say. My wife, my father, the 2 people I trusted most." "I know, sweetheart. I know." "Emily's moved out," he said. "Filed for divorce herself. Trying to get ahead of it, I guess. And Dad..." His voice cracked. "Dad won't return my calls." "Daniel, I don't want to talk to him anyway," he said quickly. I need time to process all of this." "Of course. Take all the time you need." "Mom?" His voice was small, young, like the little boy who used to crawl into my lap when he was scared. "Are you okay?" The question nearly broke me. After everything, after his entire world had imploded, he was asking if I was okay. "I will be," I said. And I meant it. The headlines ran for a week. Local business owner charged with fraud. Daughter-in-law implicated in embezzlement scheme. Michael's face was everywhere, hollow-eyed, shoulders slumped, the confident businessman replaced by something smaller, diminished. The company announced his resignation. Voluntary, they said, though everyone knew the truth. Emily disappeared. Left town within days of the judgment. Rumors swirled. A new man in another state. Debts she couldn't pay. A breakdown in a motel parking lot. I didn't know what was true. I didn't particularly care. I sold the house in January. Too many memories, too many ghosts. I took my settlement, more than I'd expected, more than I needed, and bought a small cottage by the ocean, 3 hours north. It was perfect, just big enough for me. A garden, a desk by the window overlooking the water. Rachel helped me move. "New beginning," she said, opening a bottle of wine as we sat on the porch that first night, listening to the waves. "New beginning," I echoed. Spring came slowly. The ocean was still cold, gray, restless, but beautiful in its wildness. I started writing, not a blog exactly, but letters, to women I'd never meet, about surviving, about rebuilding, about the slow, hard work of becoming yourself again. I called it the quiet table. It started small, a few readers, then more. Messages filled my inbox, strangers thanking me for making them feel less alone. Your story gave me courage, one woman wrote. I filed for divorce today. I confronted my husband about his affair, wrote another, because you showed me I could. I never wrote about revenge. I wrote about dignity, about choosing yourself, about the moment you realize that being alone is better than being with someone who makes you feel small. One afternoon in April, I drove to the beach at low tide. The sky was bruised with sunset colors, purple and gold and deep crimson. I walked to the water's edge, wind whipping my hair, salt spray on my face. From my pocket, I pulled out a small silver key, the last thing I'd kept from the old house, the spare key to Michael's office, the one I'd used that night to find the truth. I turned it over in my palm once, then I threw it into the surf. It disappeared instantly. No splash, no ripple, just gone. Standing there, watching the waves roll in and retreat, I felt something shift inside me. Not closure exactly. I wasn't sure I believed in closure, but release. The kind that comes when you finally stop carrying weight that was never yours to bear. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who baked apple pies and swallowed lies and made herself small to keep peace. I didn't hate her. I loved her, actually. She'd done her best with what she knew. But I wasn't her anymore. I whispered to the ocean, to the wind, to no one and everyone. You thought you broke me. The waves crashed, endless and indifferent. But you can't break what finally became whole. Winter came again. The cottage was warm, filled with books and blankets and the smell of bread baking. The quiet table had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. Thousands of readers now. Women from everywhere, sharing their stories, finding strength in each other. I'd even published some of the letters as a small book, Silence No More, Letters to Women Who Survived. It sold modestly but steadily, enough that I didn't need Michael's money anymore. I'd earned my own. Daniel visited for Thanksgiving, his first visit since everything had happened. He looked older, sadder, but also stronger somehow, steadier. I'm seeing someone, he told me over coffee. A therapist, working through everything. That's good, sweetheart. And I met someone, a woman, Sarah. She's kind, honest. He smiled slightly. Nothing like Emily. I'd like to meet her. You will, soon. He paused. Have you heard from Dad? No. You? Once. He called a few months ago. Wanted money. Daniel's jaw tightened. I hung up on him. I'm sorry. Don't be. He looked at me directly. You did the right thing, Mom. All of it. I know it doesn't feel that way sometimes, but you did. That night, after Daniel left, I sat by the window with a blanket around my shoulders. The ocean was wild tonight. Waves crashing against rocks, spray flying high. I opened my laptop and began writing. There will come a day when you wake up and realize you no longer need to forgive the people who hurt you. You won't hate them. You won't love them. You'll just stop thinking about them. That is the real freedom. Not revenge, not justice, just absence. A life finally unshared with those who tried to break it. I'm writing this from my cottage by the sea. The same sea that was here before my pain and will be here long after. The same sea that teaches me every day how to let things go. Michael and Emily are gone from my life now, not because I forced them out, but because I simply stopped making room for them. Their choices consumed them. Their lies caught up with them. I didn't need to destroy them. They did that themselves. And I survived. I rebuilt. I became whole. Not the same woman I was before. Someone better. Someone who knows her worth. Someone who will never again confuse silence with peace or compliance with love. If you're reading this from the middle of your own storm, please know you will survive this too. The worst day has already happened. Now comes the hard, beautiful work of becoming yourself again. The sea is waiting. The future is waiting. And you are so much stronger than you know. I posted the letter and closed my laptop. Outside, the moon rose over the water, spilling silver light across the waves. The same moon that had watched me fall apart, now watching me begin again. The story that started with betrayal ended here, in this quiet cottage, in this moment of peace, in the silent victory of a woman who refused to stay broken. I stood, walked to the door, and stepped outside onto the porch. The night was cold and clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds. I breathed in the salt air and smiled. Behind me, the past. Ahead of me, possibility. And inside me, finally, after everything, peace. The tide kept rolling in, the world kept turning, and I never looked back again.